Hello, I'm Andy Cochran from the Nass Mountain region. I'm going to take you through sections E and F, which cover marketing and production contracts, direct sales, and accounts receivable. Information collected in these sections is USDA's only source of data to separate production, income, and expenses among operators, contractors, landlords, and others. Farmers use contracts to manage income risks, obtain compensation for higher product quality, create specific outlets for products, and provide assurance that they can make payments on their debts. Processors use contracts to maintain timely flows of products with desired attributes and greater control over the characteristics and consistency of the products they acquire. Contracts are widely used in the production and sale of U.S. agricultural commodities. In 2017, 49% of the value of livestock production was raised under contract agreements, usually between farmers and processors, while contracts governed 21% of the value of crop production. Breaking it down further, marketing contracts are commonly found with peanuts, tobacco, sugar beets, fruits, cotton, and dairy operations. They are shown in orange on this chart. The green portion represents production contracts, which are commonly found with poultry and hog farms, vegetable growers, and some types of beef cattle operations like backgrounders and feedlots. And the use of contracts isn't just limited to big corporate farms or any one type of farm. This pie chart shows the distribution. Considering farms which have contracts, nearly 80% are small or mid-sized family farms with less than $1 million of gross cash farm income. This kind of detailed analysis is only possible with ARMS data. Here's the big question. What's the difference between a marketing and a production contract? If you've been to ARMS trainings before, maybe your eyes glaze over when you hear the words contractor and contractee. Your interviewer's manual does have comprehensive definitions and examples, but for our purposes, I'll lay it out in simple terms. The clue is in the name. Marketing contracts market something. The farmer you're interviewing owns the commodity, and the contract ends with him selling it. So the dollars represent a price based on the terms of the contract. A production contract produces something. The farmer you're interviewing does not own the commodity, but instead provides a service to raise or grow it. Payment is a fee for this service. Because the farmer isn't buying or selling the commodity, the dollars for a production contract should be much less than the whole commodity is worth. In order to belong in Section E, the contract must have been delivered in the reference year. In most cases, delivered means physically removed from the operation, but delivered also includes when partial payment was received, even if the contractor hasn't yet taken delivery. For marketing contracts, if the commodity hadn't been delivered yet by the end of the year, then it should be excluded here from Section E, and instead recorded in Section I, the assets section. For production contracts, where the commodity is still being serviced at the end of the year, exclude it from Section E, and be sure to record the value of inputs used in the assets section. Think back to sections B and C, where the cash sales column said, for any year's production. It's the same case here. The operator could have a marketing contract for a previous year's commodity. If it was delivered in our reference year, then it belongs in Section E, and you should also record the beginning of year asset value in Section I for that commodity. So you've determined the contract was delivered in our reference year. Write a description of what the commodity is. Then refer to your respondent booklet to look up the code corresponding with that commodity. If you're entering this in CAPI, the commodity codes are automatically associated by using the drop-down menu. Be aware the drop-down menu is in alphabetical order. However, all livestock and livestock products are grouped below all the crops. So to find milk in CAPI, you will need to scroll down past all the crops past winter wheat in the W's before you seek the cattle and dairy products. If you don't see what you're looking for, you may need to scroll down further. The type of contract is indicated in column 3. A few years ago, the two contract types were consolidated into one table, so it's important that you identify which type of contract is in each line. As I mentioned earlier, most hog, poultry, and fed cattle contracts are production contracts. Most milk and crop sale contracts are marketing contracts. There can be exceptions to any of these, so focus on whether the producer is selling something he or she owns, which is a marketing contract, or if they are paid for services to raise or grow something that they don't own, which is a production contract. In columns 4 and 5, we want to record the quantity delivered through the contract. Unit codes for column 5 are located below the table to correspond with the quantity delivered. Most of you already know that we need to avoid duplicating contract dollars with cash sales dollars. But something you may not know is that the quantity delivered under this contract should overlap the quantity sold or removed in sections B and C for crops and livestock. Quantity is reported in both places, but dollars are not. We know that all commodities in this table must have been delivered in our reference year, but it's still possible the producer hasn't been paid yet. That's why column 6 says final price or fee received. This is what they negotiated as their price for marketing contracts or the fee for service in a production contract. The production contract fee should only represent the fee for their services. Operators who have production contracts, such as a cattle feedlot or a poultry operation, have a tendency to overstate their fees. They often include things like feed and veterinary expenses, which they may pay for, but later bill to the contractor. We need to exclude money received from contractors as reimbursement for expenses. Those contractor expenses are accounted for separately. So we have quantity in column 4 and price or fee in column 6. Is column 7 really necessary? Actually, yes. Sometimes the total is equal to quantity times price, but it could also be different. When the producer has not yet been fully paid for commodities delivered under these contracts, then column 7 would be something less than quantity times price. When that happens, the amount owed to them should be recorded as accounts receivable in the next section. A common example is milk sales from dairies. We saw in the ERS chart a minute ago that dairies frequently use marketing contracts because they need to ensure there is a market for their milk. Cows don't take a day off when sales are slow. The milk is transported off the farm in trucks on a frequent, regular basis, sometimes even daily. But typically the payments are bi-weekly or some interval longer than the daily deliveries. So at the end of the year, there is some quantity of milk that was delivered in our reference year under the contract for which they have not yet received payment. The money owed belongs in accounts receivable. I'll show you how that looks in a minute. Occasionally, I see enumerators report a value in column 7, which is greater than quantity times price, with a comment that they were paid in our reference year for what was owed in a previous year's contract. That is incorrect. As I said, only contracts which were delivered in our reference year belong in this table. If money was owed for a previous year's contract, then I'll show you in a minute how to record that in the accounts receivable section. One final thing about contracts. Within each line, the units must be consistent between quantity and price. I'll demonstrate an example with cattle because units often vary between pounds, hundredweight, and head, sometimes even in the same sentence. The producer tells you he sold 80 calves under a marketing contract for $160 per hundredweight and was paid in full. The calves weighed 500 pounds each on average, or 40,000 pounds total. Take a look at this first attempt. I wrote down 80 head, where 11 is the unit for head, but $160 is not the price per head, it's the price per hundredweight. So that's inconsistent. What about my second attempt? I wrote that he sold 40,000 pounds with unit code 1 for pounds. But again, $160 is the price per hundredweight, not pounds. So that's inconsistent as well. What about my third attempt? With a little math, I converted 40,000 pounds to 400 hundredweight, expressed with unit code 2 for hundredweight. $160 is the price per hundredweight, so this example is consistent. There's often more than one way to record it consistently, but you may have to do a little math or probe the respondent. This fourth attempt is an alternative with consistent units. I wrote that 80 calves were sold using code 11 for head, but since the producer expressed his price in dollars per hundredweight, I did a little math to convert it to dollars per head and arrived at $800 per head for the price. Section E continues with direct sales on the CRR version questionnaire. Direct sales is a subset of the commodity sales reported elsewhere, meaning the dollars should overlap. These questions ask about commodities sold directly to consumers, such as at farmers markets, farm stores, and community-supported agriculture arrangements, or to intermediary supply chains, such as retail outlets and regional distributors, who then sell directly to individuals or to institutions like hospitals and schools. These criteria are also used to qualify operations for the Local Food Marketing Practices Survey, which NASS conducts every 5 years as a follow-on to the Census of Agriculture. In 2020, 7% of farms sold commodities through direct sales, which were valued at nearly $10.7 billion. The value of direct sales increased dramatically in 2020, 35% more than in 2019. The big change was likely affected by supply chain issues from COVID-19. It will be very interesting to see results from this year's survey. This chart from the 2021 edition of America's Diverse Family Farms, an ERS publication, shows value of direct sales in 2019 and 2020 next to each other, broken out by the outlet categories on the bottom, and showing small, medium, and large farms in blue, orange, and gray, respectively. Restaurants and grocery stores are the largest direct sales outlet by value, and it is predominantly represented by the gray portion, which is farms with more than $350,000 of gross cash farm income. Another thing to note from this chart is that small farms with direct sales, shown here in blue, more commonly use direct-to-consumer outlets like farmers markets and farm stores. Large farms with direct sales, shown here in gray, more commonly use intermediary supply chains like restaurants, grocery stores, and regional distributors. Each category showed a cumulative increase from 2019 to 2020. You can read through the direct sales questions on your own, but I want to point out a change to the routing instructions for this year. If they answer no to the direct sales screener, don't skip the whole page like you would have in the past. Now it says, go to item 5. Item 5 is new this year, so be careful not to overlook it. There are no instructions to skip item 5 because it applies to every farm, regardless of whether they have direct sales or not. Item 5 is a series of yes or no questions about incentives from commodity buyers to use sustainable production practices.
Welcome. You were promised a strength coach, and well, there's 2 of us. I'm Hans.
I'm Franz. You may remember us from our great success as the stars of the 3-2 Live television show. But hey, we've moved on to bigger and better things.
Yeah, like government training videos. But we are still keeping it top form. Ha! Top form.
And today, we are doing that by targeting a very specific muscle group, the arms. Our
job as strength coaches is to make sure you are getting in your reps. So, with every rep, I'm going to ask you about arms. Arms. That sounds easy enough. Let's get started. Question 1. Which section would cash sales in the reference year for the current or old crop be reported? Section B? Right! Now, which section would delivered contracts be reported in? Section E? Yeah! Okay. What if money was owed to the operation?
Hey, that's not fair. We haven't talked about that. But I did read Sue's questionnaire and the interviewer's manual, so I know it's section F. Way to try and trick me.
Right. Okay. What if the commodity was not delivered and no money was received?
Ooh, section I, assets.
Right! Because it's still on the farm. Great job! You got them all. That was a good exercise for arms. But if you'd been wrong, it would have been 30 push-ups for every wrong answer. Ha ha ha.
Let's move on to accounts receivable in section F, where we record deferred payments across calendar years. There's a common misconception that you should put unsold crops here, but that's incorrect. Unsold and money owed are different things and should not be duplicated. Here's the difference. Unsold commodities are still on hand, so no money is owed for them. Do not record them in section F. Instead, record the value of unsold commodities as an operation asset in section I. On the other hand, accounts receivable is where you record money still owed for commodities that have already been delivered but not yet paid. In either case, the inventory carryover or the deferred payments could be from the previous year or going into the next year. The key distinction is when was the commodity sold or delivered? Earlier, I described a dairy marketing contract scenario. Remember, dairies typically deliver milk daily or every few days, but only get paid for it every few weeks. So in this section, we account for those deferred payments at the beginning and end of the year for commodities delivered in the prior year. Here's how that should look. The producer delivered 1,000 hundredweight of milk at $15 per hundredweight in late December last year and was paid in the first week of January. So he was owed $15,000 on January 1st for milk already sold or delivered. Record that in item 1A. Next, out of the $15,000 he was owed at the beginning of the year, how much was paid back to him during the year? All of it. So record $15,000 in the subset question. At the end of our reference year, he delivered 1,000 hundredweight of milk at $17 per hundredweight and was paid in the first week of next year. So he was owed $17,000 on December 31st for milk sold during our reference year. Record $17,000 in 1B. Let's tie this back to the marketing contract in section E. If a dairy producer sold 52,000 hundredweight of milk in the reference year at $17 per hundredweight, the total sale under that contract is $884,000. But since he hadn't been paid yet for the final week of deliveries, the amount received during our reference year is $17,000 less than that. Lastly, why don't you add $15,000 to the amount received in column 7, which was owed to him at the beginning of the year? because contracts in this section exclude anything sold or delivered outside the reference year. If you're not familiar with dairy contracts, another common example is with fruit producers, especially fruit sold for processing. Oftentimes, the grower might only receive a small payment for the fruit delivered during the production year, generally about half of the contracted price. The other half of the payments are received after the crop has been marketed by the processor, generally late into the next year. Maybe you can think of crops in your area where payments are typically deferred across calendar years. Contracts, direct sales, and accounts receivable each tell an important part of the farm financial story, showing how producers manage risk, how they market their crops and livestock, and how deferred payments can affect year-to-year farm income. Thanks for watching.